Okay, we appear to be live.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sarah Shearer. I'm the president of the Albany Public Library Board of Trustees, and I call our December board meeting to order. Sorry, I have to minimize the screen. First order of business, is there any public comment?
We have not received any public comment. If anyone from the public wishes to make a comment, you are asked to send an email to publiccomment@albanypubliclibrary.org or leave a voicemail at 518-290-6905. Both accounts are constantly monitored. Please leave your name and address to identify yourself. And there will be another opportunity at the end of this meeting for public comments as well.
Thank you, Rebecca. The next order of business is the consent agenda. And if somebody would like to make a motion on this.
So moved.
Who is that?
Sarah, Sarah Dallas.
I second.
Donna, thank you. Donna seconds. Any further comment on the motion? I have to scroll so I can see everybody. Seeing none, we can go into board docs to vote.
Oh, yes.
Arlene, please state your vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. For the record, Dr. Robinson and Thomas McCarthy are not present. And Donna Dixon, how do you vote?
I vote in favor, but I see the motion on my screen, but I don't see an option to vote on it.
Okay, and you're logged into the account?
Yep. I think so. Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, wait. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
All right. Got it. Okay. I'm good from here on out. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And motion carries. Thank you. The next item of our agenda is the finance section with Sean and Adam.
Good evening. So the reports in the agenda this month cover October of 2021, which is a third or 33% of the way through the 21-22 fiscal year. The total expenditures as of the end of October are 36% of the overall budget, which is a bit higher than what we would normally be expecting so far this year. The occupancy costs section is the primary reason for this. Other budget lines contribute to this as well, but none as significant as the ones in that section. Revenue has remained steady with the exception of the interest income line, which shows a loss this month, and the fees and salary line, which shows a significant increase. The library received the annual tax levy in October, which is causing some increases in the bank balances. And for the capital, there was no significant capital fund activity during October. So I'll turn it over to Adam to go into a little more detail on those items.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And yeah, I'll just clarify some of the points that Sean made. So the occupancy cost lines that are overspent are going to be addressed in the current budget modification, which we're going to be discussing later. The IT hardware line is currently a little overstated because a large computer purchase that was made during October is going to be funded by a grant, which we have not yet received. The market value of our investments decreased in October, hence the loss reported in the interest income revenue line. And a patron left a significant amount of money to the library in their will, which has been factored into the fees and sales line and explains why that line is now far over the projected revenue total. So if anyone has any questions on any of the reports, we're happy to try and answer them for you. Thanks.
Do any trustees have any questions for Sean or Adam regarding our finances? Okay, thank you both. The next item of business, I believe, is trustees reporting out. Has anybody interacted with APL over the past month that you would like to share with the group?
Hi, I haven't been able to interact in person, but I've been following the social media posts with the book covers, and those have been really fun and a blast. And I think they're really engaging people. I don't know what the impressions are for the individual ones, but they've really been fun. So thank you to whoever is making those book covers. They're doing a great job.
On the heels of that, the Tilda Swinton as Albany Public Library was aces. And if you haven't seen it, I suggest just Googling that.
I will admit that's been getting a lot of positive feedback from the community and from outside the community as well. I believe we had, the last time I looked was well over 4,000 hits on that one. So
Wow. Luke in PR is a very talented man.
All right. Thank you, Donna and Jenna, for those shares. Next is the UHLS Liaison report. Arlene, if you would like to give that.
Okay. The Upper Hudson Library System met on November 10th. And basically the focus was about the budget. We got good news on the Upper Hudson Library System budget. They received they are receiving a reimbursement that's COVID related for retaining staff during the pandemic of about $230,000. The good news is that these monies are unrestricted. And so they were able to make adjustments to the budget. So they did, they feel very good. We feel very good about how that worked out. We reviewed the proposed budget to the Central Library. It reflects level funding from New York State. Most services were retained. Unfortunately, to do so, we discontinued Ancestry.com. The monies are being received to $375,000 are being received through the America Recovery Plan Act of 2021. These funds are going to be shared by 3 library systems. And they have, I've listed the planned projects that they're looking to include, supporting. And that is an accessible website project, digital equity training, and awareness campaign, advertising campaign. The Upper Hudson Library System staff continues to provide support to member libraries. They work with the boards and staff. Oh my goodness, providing technical assistance as needed. And then the Racial Equity Committee, the Anti-Racism Task Force is now formally named the Upper Hudson Library System Racial Equity Committee. And these guys have been busy providing training, conducting research, offering opportunities for continuing discussions among members. These guys have been on the ball and doing great work. In terms of committee work, the Finance Committee and the Services Committee met. The Finance Committee reviewed and recommended approval of the Trustees report and the October 21 Purchase Journal. The Service Committee reviewed and recommended approval for the 2022 Central Library budget, and both were approved by the full board. And we decided not to meet this month, so there is no meeting of the Upper Hudson Library System in December.
Thank you for that report, Arlene. Does anybody have any questions? All right. Our next committee on the agenda, I believe, is the Ad Hoc Executive Director Search Committee.
Okay, yes, thank you. We met on December 10th. Myself, Donna Dixon, and Jare Gauls, along with Melanie and Rebecca. And there are several recommendations the committee would like the full board to take into consideration. First, we recommended a consultant. Donna reached out to Bradbury, Miller and Associates. So their services would include evaluate and recommend a list of candidates. Also coordinate and assist with the interviews, marketing the position, recruiting and developing a pool of 15 qualified candidates, as well as they'll do the reference checks, the background checks with 3 references, checks of the finalist, and to coordinate and assist with offer and negotiations when we come to that point. Also coordinate and assist with post-hire support with 120 days from the date of the letter, which was their proposal was on the 9th. So from that day till it would be 120 days with 3 to 4 months looking at the from the beginning of the process to the end. Their fee would be $24,000. The retainer would be $6,000 after the approval of the agreement. And then, of course, the remainder would be subtracted and payable after 30 days after we successfully had a, hire. Also, we have the board can also vote to waive, because I know that the $24,000 is a little bit out of the reach, but we need an RFP. Because of time constraints, it can be considered an emergency if we do, because of the time frame. If we were to take the bid, it would significantly delay the process. And instead of 3 months, we could take up to 6 to 8 months, because if we decided to do in-house by posting, we could post a position immediately and be prepared to do the work as mentioned above. However, the proposal does give us a broad scope of the necessary steps that we have to take. So it is a type of a blueprint for us. Also, however, the committee discussed at length regarding the qualifications of the ED with the MLS. We found that we would just have a bigger pool of candidates if we just required that qualification. If I'm missing something, please, Jare or Donna, feel free to add any input.
So if I may
Yes.
pipe in a little bit to speak up. So there was a concern because the executive director position, as it was posted the last go around, was posted, if you look at the qualifications, required qualifications, it said with a master's degree. And then later on, as a special requirement, it also listed was in possession or could be in possession of the professional librarian certificate. And it was recommended to us from the outgoing director that we would consider somebody with either an MPA or the MLS. It was then brought to my attention that according to the DLD, it is not allowed to have a director without the MLS. We would lose our charter as such. And that's why although civil service did approve the job spec for the executive director without the MLS requirement, the special requirement of the added must be in possession or be able to possess the professional librarian certificate was then added. Bob, if you want to speak to a little bit more of the history of it, it was actually done once in 2009 and then again in 2014. And I was not aware of that when I spoke initially, but then I was corrected.
I think that's the right summary. It really has to do with the fact that DLD is unwilling at this point, without an application which we haven't made, to waive our requirement to comply with the minimum standards under the department's regulations. Because you're a library of a certain size, you can't employ a library director who doesn't have the public librarian's professional certificate. One of the requirements of holding that certificate is that you have an appropriate master's degree in library science or master's of science in information studies. And so there was quite a kerfuffle about this many, many, many years ago. And somehow there was an old job description floating around that didn't have the public librarian's professional certificate requirement listed on it. But Melody's right. It's a requirement now.
I also add, just speaking in defense of the MLS, that there is a lot of management involved, and also sort of public administration coursework in the majority of masters in library science, and it's not a bad thing to have an MLS director, in my opinion. I think it's a really positive thing. That said, also let the group know that it's like, oh, okay, it can't be a library because we're a library of a certain size. The size of library that you can be a director at without an MLS is 7,000 people. It's really, it's like, Lansingburg. So yeah, I want to put in a strong call for let's get an MLS director because of the timing.
I agree, because you're not only serving the city of Albany, but you are serving several libraries. We are the central library. So, I can't see us not having someone with that technical expertise. It's like inconceivable to me that we wouldn't require somebody to have a background in library science or library administration.
I did just want to add in just very quickly to throw out there in reference to the option for the candidate to go back to school to get that while they're employed, and just referencing the previous situation. I do know in reference to them being able to just go back and for more education, whoever the candidate may be.
And already speaking in terms of getting an MPA. So
okay. I was going to say we would lose our charter if they didn't have the MLS with me.
Yes, but when I'm saying, I just didn't want to forget that tidbit as well in reference to them going back to school.
Well, I think it's a moot point in order to keep our funding source. And we do need our.
That's the thing that you'd actually lose. I don't know that you'd lose your charter instantly, but you'd lose your funding quickly, and DLD would give you a very hard time.
And we're not invisible to DLD because we're down the block. So I think this is we have.
Albany is a small town too. Like
The state librarian lives on Madison Avenue.
She's a good
aware.
friend of mine.
But my next question has to do with, do we write the job description that a recruiter will use, or are they going to do that? Because I know it could be different than the civil service description.
Well, of course. Oh, go ahead. Well, I was going to refer to the Bradbury and Associates.
Right, and what I was going to say was, I think we are bound to use the civil service job description as the official description of the job, but what the recruitment firm will assist us with is writing sort of a package to go along with it that talks about, why someone would want to come to Albany, why you would want to live here, the strengths of our city, the strengths of our team, the leadership team, all of the wonderful things about Albany that would attract someone here. So they would, that's one of the many things that they would do, is assist us with crafting that language to, sort of envelop the basic job description. If I may also, just going back to the MPA MLS issue, as an MLS candidate, I think it would be advisable, or not an MLS candidate, I'm an MLS holder. I think it would be nice to include something about an MPA or additional master's degree is desired, highly desired, preferable, just to have that in there to open the door to that conversation with
I thought that was what the discussion
candidates.
was going to be about. That
I'm sorry?
I thought that was what the discussion was going to be about in reference. Well, one of the things in reference to whether what was everyone's else consensus what about the MPA. Do we want it? Do we not want it? What is everybody else feeling in reference to that?
Can I just jump in? If we're going, I understand, and I think that's not a bad thing to say, an MPA preferred. But if you're looking at somebody with 2 master's degrees, does our salary reflect the qualifications? That's the first thing I wanted to ask. The second thing I wanted to ask is, Bradbury is a very, very reputable firm. They're doing searches all over the country. They have good results, but do we have to, Bob, have a second or come in with 2 different or 3 different firms?
So I thought Brigitte did a pretty good job of explaining the situation. There's no obligation at all to bid professional services. If the library didn't want to bid professional services, it wouldn't have to. You have, however, adopted a policy that says that with respect to professional services, you will go out to bid on, or RFP, I should say, on any professional service that is expected to exceed $5,000. So you know that Bradbury is going to exceed $5,000, and if you were paying heed to your own policy, you should do RFPs. I think that Brigitte explained that there is a theory by which the expedience that's necessary to get this moving and the time that it would take to do an RFP when you're talking about a firm that is preeminent in the field, I'm not sure that it's not appropriate for you as a board to make the decision not to do the RFP, but I think you have to affirmatively make that decision. I think you're going to have to actually have a motion passed tonight saying that we are creating an exception this evening for the library search consultant because we need to get this process moving faster than we can if we do the full RFP process. Just so that you're on record having considered that and made a decision. But you are actually going to be, carving yourself out from your own policy and doing that. And I think it's important that if you decide to do that, the board has to vote on it.
I also want to, go ahead.
I thought I'd only have one question. My second question is there money available to cover the fees, the cost? And do we also have a line to fly people in for interviews and make the accommodations necessary? Now I'm done, Jenna. Tag, you're it.
So what I had a couple of things. First off, I encourage folks while we go through this process to keep an eye on the CDLC jobs list. Another 2 director positions have been posted in the last week or so. So it just speaks to the urgency that Brigitte was talking about with this. And then number 2, just because I promise I'll get off the MLS MPA thing eventually, but I'm an MLS who lives with and loves an MPA. I think that we might be misunderstanding the differences in those degrees here a little bit. I also think that there would be a lot of overlap. It wouldn't be typical, I don't think, for folks to get an MLS and an MPA that often. I think we could say something along the lines of, we would like somebody with experience in budgeting and public administration or administration of large, but I also would be happy to come to one of the ad hoc committees and talk about this more, because I think we should probably get on the waiver rather than continue.
So speaking in terms of the budget, we do have a professional services line, and we have community relations that we tend to pull for processes like this. Adam, if you want to correct me on anything I'm saying, you could do so. I will say that we are proposing a budget modification tonight to the board because we are a little tight, but there is the potential for savings in. We're doing it out of an abundance of caution because we see that the potential for stuff to go to get even more tight. There is the potential that it could go the other way. But that's it. This is a decision for you guys to make because you are also the keepers of the budget.
I'm sorry, Melanie, I was following you. I'm not quite sure I fully grasp what you're trying to say, that we'd have to do a budget amendment to cover it. Do we have the funds?
I'm sorry, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying later on, we're proposing a budget modification because some of our lines are overspent at the moment. And so we've made adjustments, but if we need to make additional budget modifications later on.
Thank you.
And don't forget, for as long as this position remains open, we are saving the money that would be spent towards this position. So there is that to say as well.
And sorry, I will just add that although we're discussing a budget modification tonight, my understanding is that there may be another modification coming in a few months, maybe at the beginning of the fourth quarter, maybe April. So if it turns out we do need extra funds to fly people in or what have you, we can make those adjustments at that time.
Thank you. And I think I'll jump out and say that I endorse the idea of hiring a firm of this reputation and resources. I don't think, and I hope I could speak for the other trustees here, to do a full-time job search would stretch anybody. And it gets difficult. So I'll throw my hat in the ring and say, let's consider moving forward with this firm.
And if it's okay, I think I'm actually going to have Rebecca add that under new business, just so we can finish our reports and then we can vote on all of our motions together. But this was a really productive conversation. So I thank everybody for having this conversation. And I think the work that the committee has done on this. Thank you. Before we move to the next committee, I just want to make sure everybody had a chance to ask any questions or make any comments they wanted to. So just going one more time, does anybody have anything that they wanted to add to this conversation before we move on? And then we will come back to that motion later.
So we'll be bringing up a little bit more discussion when we come back to the motion later on. I can save my comments for them.
Yes, yep, we can absolutely. Someone can make the motion second, and then we can open it back up to conversation on that motion regarding the recruiting firm. All right, just going to scroll. Can't see everyone. Okay, I think we're good. The next committee is the Ad Hoc Executive Director Search Committee.
The Strategic Plan Committee.
Sorry, reading the highlighting. Ad Hoc Strategic Plan Committee, which is me. The Ad Hoc Strategic Plan Committee is myself, Arlene Way, and Jenna Patera. We had our first meeting last week, and we discussed two ideas. First, we discussed the subject matter of the strategic plan, since the board had been presented with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion-based plan from Tangible Development, who consulted for us the past, oh my gosh, pandemic blurb. Melanie, when did we start working with Tangible Development?
We started, I believe, just before the pandemic hit, as the
Beginning of
conversation.
2020.
Beginning of
Okay.
2020 was the initial conversation, and we got into the bulk of things during that spring.
Thank you. So the committee discussed the subject matter. Because it was proposed to us, one option is using the plan that was presented to us by Tangible Development as a basis for our strategic plan. We discussed as a committee possibly adding a financial piece and a facilities piece to supplement the plan that was brought to us by Tangible Development. So that was the subject matter we discussed as far as the plan goes. And then we also discussed the process going forward and how we want to create the process of creating the strategic plan. And we will be reaching out to Tangible Development to see if they would like to continue consulting with us, since they did the work on this plan to help us with our next steps, doing the research and pulling data on the proposed objectives and goals, and working with us on this plan over the next few months. And I can take any questions. And of course, Arlene or Jenna, if you have anything to add, feel free to jump in. Sarah, I see your hand.
Hi, thank you for doing all of this work. Strategic planning isn't for the faint of heart. So thank you to the committee. I just want to stress that the new minimum standards that came into effect on January 1st of this year, it has to be a community-based plan of service. And we really need to do all of those focus groups and all of that good stuff. But congratulations on getting this far.
Thank you. Just scrolling so I can see everyone. Does anybody else have any comments, questions?
I have a comment. When we last met with Tangible and got the kind of template that we I think you guys have based your work off of, did we get with that the more specific research and stuff like that you just referenced, Sarah? Because I kind of remember asking about it at the time, and I don't feel like we ever got like the more specific information about the work they did.
That's a good question, because we were going to go back to them and ask them to do that, but you're right, they may have already done that. So I can include that in my email when I reach out to them. That's a good point.
Yeah, I just feel like they might have more information than they provided to us, just for the sake of, clarity or brevity or whatever. And I feel like if we are going to continue working with them, I just want to make sure we get what we already contracted for before we enter a new contract.
Just making myself a note. Any other questions or comments regarding strategic plan?
I think it was a super productive meeting, and I really appreciated Arlene's ideas. And yours too, Sarah.
Oh, no, I appreciated Arlene's ideas too, because I believe we have a strategic plan veteran on this committee. So
It's a good team. You guys are crazy.
all right, if we're all set on strategic plan committee, and of course, and I want to thank Rebecca for sending out the links and reminders for the committees. Just a reminder again, all trustees are welcome to all committees. So if there's anything that interests you in any of the committees, especially these new ad hoc committees, which we are having a lot of discussion on, feel free to join in. The next committee is the executive committee. We had one item on the agenda, which was to make a recommendation to the board tonight, which we'll see in new business, for our legal counsel for the next 3-year contract. Again, that will be under new business, but we are making the recommendation of staying with Whiteman, Osterman, and Hannah. And I also brought up at the end of the committee meeting our scheduling our board retreat. I looked at the doodle poll and noticed that we're having a lot of, it's difficult to get a lot of us to have the same availability on the same dates. So I asked Rebecca to go out to February to see if we could find any dates where more of us could attend, because I think the date that had the most people currently for January was 5 out of 9 trustees, so about half the board. And typically we do like to have a full board, 8 or 9 trustees at a retreat. So if you're able to, after this meeting tonight, go on really quick and take the doodle poll for February dates, that would be very much appreciated. And those were the 2 items we took up at the executive committee meeting, if anybody has any questions. Seeing none, our last committee report is the Audit and Finance Committee.
So the Audit and Finance Committee met last week, I believe, and we had 2 items on our agenda. The first was making a recommendation to the full board regarding transferring funds from the fund balance into the capital fund checking account in order to pay for our upcoming construction grant projects. And this funding will just cover the expense until the grant funding is actually dispersed to us from the Uhls and New York State. So that was item 1. And item 2 was discussing our budget modification, which we're going to discuss later in this meeting, and we already brought it up a little bit. But basically, administration proposed a budget modification as we usually would do around this time of year. And we adjusted some of the lines. The takeaway, which we might come back to later, is that we're using more of our unassigned fund balance than we had originally planned in the budget. But as Melanie said, we're hopeful that the amount of unassigned fund balance that we're using in this budget modification will come down a little bit by the end of the year. But this budget modification covers all our bases and makes sure that our budget actually reflects what we're spending and where we're spending it. So that was our meeting. We made a recommendation to have a recommendation that the full board approve the budget modification. And yeah, so that's where our committee came out on it. It was a productive meeting, and thank you guys who participated for your thoughts.
Does anybody have any questions or comments for the Audit and Finance Committee? And as Tom said, we are going to be coming back to the budget mod under new business if there's anything specific pertaining to that. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the Executive Director's Report.
You're on mute, ma'am.
I apologize for that. I thought I was on top of that. So just going over my summary at the top of the Executive Director's Report, for COVID-19, we did have one staff member who did test positive this month for COVID. The individual contracted it from an outside source and has went into quarantine and had completed quarantine with no other contact tracing needed for that. Our services and programs, we continue to have success with all of our virtual programming as we're scaling back on our outside in-person programming due to the weather. Our final large event of the year was our Delaware Community Farmers Market on the last day of the month. They hosted a big holiday event. Actually, it was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and the Friends and Foundation of the Albany Public Library opened up their book shed that they now are in possession of and had one last book sale that gathered, I believe, around 90 individuals. So it was one of the larger activities for that. We continue to have success with our make and take craft programs. I know Jenna has participated in many of those in the past. These have been wonderful because they allow us to do the virtual programs and still have at least a slight bit of contact and interaction with our patrons as well in person, because they come to pick up the craft supplies. So we do get to have those people in person as well. Our operations, we did conduct an informal anonymous survey of our staff to find out what our vaccination rate was, because we know that information has been requested by you guys in past board meetings. We did receive 81 staff members responded to the survey, and 96% of those individuals are fully vaccinated, which means they have either completed their full course or have completed their full course and gotten a booster. We considered both to be fully vaccinated. There is discussion that we have the ability to make that a mandated response, not mandating the vaccine itself, but mandating that all staff respond to this so we can get a more accurate number, but we're still in discussions on if we're going to do that or not. We have been invited, it's kind of an upcoming thing, but I did want to let everybody know that we have been invited to attend a listening session with Senator Ryan, who is the chairman of the Committee on Libraries. That is happening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Myself, Deanna DiCarlo, Jim Simpel, our IT manager, and Donna will be in attendance with us. And we found out as of yesterday that it is not just Senator Ryan, it is also Pat Fahey, Michelle Hinchey, and possibly Senator Breslin as well. So it should be a really interesting conversation. This is the Capital Region stop of the tour, so there should be several other libraries in attendance as well. Our statistics, our circulation continues a small but noticeable increase. Overall, our computer use actually saw a nice large uptick this past month, and that is primarily because we have now implemented the use of desktop units as well as the Chromebooks. We're still a little lower than we used to be for numbers of the desktops available, but having those as well as the Chromebooks to allow for social distancing space has definitely given us a nice uptick in our computer usage. Our door count numbers have plateaued. We were expecting them to continually increase, but we understand with the current state of the pandemic, there probably are individuals who are a little bit more hesitant to come into the library. So that number has plateaued out. And safety, I did want to bring up to everybody's attention that we did have a patron verbally attack one of our staff members quite significantly, enough for them to call the police in on this because physical harm was threatened. The staff member did file a police report. The police came, and for that, the rest of the evening, because the individual was asked to leave and has also lost library privileges for a year, staff was felt a little unsafe. So for the rest of the evening, the doors were locked and our CEC let in individuals one by one. So nobody was denied service, but they wanted to make sure that the individual did not return into the library unimpeded because it was that egregious. But police report has been filed with the individual. And like I said, they have lost library privileges for a year, which is our current max that we can give an individual. And I open up the floor to any other questions that we may have. I will state that we are making a recommendation to update our continuation of services plan or our pandemic operation plan. That has been included as well, and I'll speak to that more later on when we take the vote on that.
If nobody has any questions, you want to go over informational items?
Definitely. So a couple of, and I know this is, these are always the stuff I add last minute just to kind of keep you guys updated. The CDTA electric car and charging station agreement will most likely appear next month on our agenda to vote on, to accept that agreement. There was a little bit of a hiccup once we started working on it. We realized that it wasn't an agreement, or the agreement hadn't stated CDTA, it stated Mobility Development Operations, which is a third party that is going to actually oversee the program. And we believe after talking with CDTA that this will make the agreement a three-way agreement between Albany Public Library, CDTA, and Mobility Development Operations. So we're currently working on that three-way agreement with them and hope to have it ready to go by next month. A request was made to Albany Public Library by the Albany Police Department to request exterior camera footage from outside the Delaware library in regards to the shooting that happened down the block on November 18th. As per the most recent policy update for the privacy and confidentiality of library records, we did state that a subpoena would be needed. We have not heard back from them after that statement, but they said they did understand. And we don't know if, like I said, we haven't heard back from them since the initial request, so we don't know if that is going any further, but I did want to let you know that that did occur, that request was made. And then we did, Sarah Dallas had two questions that were brought up in regards to the board packet. One was regarding the updates to the pandemic operation plan or continuation of services plan regarding face shields. Why are they still included in the document? And I stated they're still included because if you remember that this is not a COVID operation plan, it's a pandemic operation plan. And the intent of the document that should there be an additional pandemic that happens sometime, hopefully long distance in the future, that we have the ability to modify and shift as needed. And as it states, it's PPE will be provided to staff, which may include face masks, face shields, gowns, and whatnot. So should we encounter a pandemic that would require face shields, that's included in the plan, and that's why we kept it the way it was. And then Sarah also had a question regarding if APL has faced any challenges for materials that are found in the library, so any book challenges. In the library industry right now, there seems to be an uptick. It's made national news across several outlets that there's an uptick in book challenges across the nation. And she was wondering, do we think our policy is robust enough on that? And I believe it is. It's served us well. I can state that since I have been employed with Albany Public Library, there has not been a public challenge to any book. We do have a request for reconsideration form, so we do have a process in place should somebody challenge a book. However, the New York State Library did a Ask a Lawyer program last week on the matter, and several of my staff members watched the webinar. I have it on record, waiting to watch when I get a chance, if I ever do get a chance to watch it. And it was our understanding that this, while it is happening in public libraries, it's primarily happening in public school libraries. That seems to be where the bulk of those challenges are happening. We're not hearing as many happening. They are happening in public libraries, but not as many that are happening in the school districts.
Does anybody have any questions or comments based on the informational items? Seeing none, I believe we can move on to new business. And if it's okay, I would recommend going into executive session first and then coming out and handling all of our motions at that point. And we would be going into executive session for the purpose of discussing appointing an individual or a company. The executive committee will be able to fill in our fellow trustees on the interviews we conducted with all of the law firms and why we made our recommendation, and answer any questions anyone may have.
I make a motion to go into executive session to discuss the items mentioned by Sarah.
I second.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, we can go into board docs and vote.
Arlene, please state your vote. She's giving the thumbs up. That's a yes.
I'm seeing it blown up on my screen. So if those are results, I'm sorry, I can't see them.
Motion passed.
Thank you.
Motion carries.
Yeah, and if we can just get into a breakout room, we're all set.
I don't think I'm gonna go in there right now.
No.
I saw the invite. I was like, I don't think that's
It was an automatic invite.
Did they send you the engagement letter, Mel or Sarah? It would have just come today, probably.
Engagement letter?
Yeah.
With their decision?
It's when I did I drafted an engagement letter with them for them over the weekend. And I think Melanie didn't send it to you.
No.
It's not critical. It's just, it would be good if the board had it when they pass the resolution.
Okay,
I can email it to you right now.
that'd be great. Bob, I just added it to 9.1 as a supporting document.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Rebecca, are you ready for who made the motion?
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, it's okay. Sarah Dallas made the motion and Arlene Way seconded.
Motion carried.
Yes. Unanimous. Okay, the first item under new business is selection of legal counsel. If somebody would like to make a motion, we can then have any remaining conversation on that.
So
Actually, the executive committee recommended, so it just needs a second.
that works. And there's also a resolution that can be moved that I sent to Rebecca this afternoon. It's on the board docs.
Thank you. So because it's a resolution now, should we get a motion in a second?
Same process as usual. I think you can have the executive committee present it if you want, and then a second.
Okay. Is there a second on the resolution?
I second.
Who is that? Sorry, I'm scrolling. I can't see everyone.
Brigitte.
Thank you, Brigitte. Is there any further comment on the resolution before us to appoint Whiteman, Osterman, Hannah as our legal counsel for the next 3 years? I will say, I will thank the firms that we interviewed. We had some really good firms interview, but we've received really good service from Whiteman, Osterman, Hannah, and we're looking to continue that at this time. If there's no further conversation on the motion, we can go to board docs to vote. Sorry, resolution.
Arlene, please state your vote. Sarah Dallas, please state your vote.
Aye.
I see motion carries. Is there a way you could minimize that, Rebecca? I'm only seeing partial. Thank you. And motion carries. Next item under new business is the large audit.
We're very happy.
Thank you, Bob. The next item is the large auditorium audio and visual RFP.
RFB. It's a request for bid. This was the issue that we had before with the confusion. So this was to remind everybody, we received bullet aid grant to do this large auditorium project, and we did an initial round of getting quotes for it. There was some confusion, so in order to resolve that confusion with the companies, we decided to formally submit a request for bid, is what it was called. So we went through the full process with documentation, and we received 3 bids. I do apologize on the lateness of getting this to you guys. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle with a timing issue, but we went through and it was resolved and confirmed with legal that all 3 bids were accepted. And looking at the bid, we do have one that is definitely the lowest, which was Metro Sound Pros, and that is the one that we would like to go with. The 3, by comparing the pricing and adherence to the bid document, they were the one that checked all the boxes for that. So we would like to go with them. And so we just need the committee's decision. The library committee that we had working on this project has looked through everything, and that is our recommendation. So we just do need the board to approve.
And we have prepared a resolution for this award as well, Sarah. It's attached to board docs.
Thank you.
And just for an update, so if there's any confusion about the bid fee and the additional hearing loop bid, we did have that separated out in the bid documents. We are getting some additional funding from Upper Hudson to cover the hearing loop system. So that's why we did have it separate, because some of that will be covered under an additional grant.
Would somebody like to move the resolution?
I'll make them.
Donna, and then Brigitte, would you like to second?
Yes, a second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, we can go to board docs to vote.
Oh, yes.
And the motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
The next item is the budget modification. I'm not sure who wants to present, Tom or Adam. Or Melanie, or
I'll
whoever
go
wants
for
to
it.
present the budget modification.
Yeah, I'll take that on. So we did present this document to the Audit and Finance Committee last week and went over it in a fair amount of detail. I'll just try to summarize it here. So basically what this modification is proposing is that we project unassigned fund balance usage of approximately $593,000. That compared to the original budget, which had unassigned fund balance usage of about $355,000. So that is an increase of about $237,000 in unassigned fund balance usage. So the reasoning for that, it really comes from a couple of areas of the expenditures budgets. The first is some of these facilities lines that we've talked about in the finance section of these meetings the last few times. The building repairs and maintenance line, the utilities line, and the furniture and building improvements line have all been overspent so far this year. And so we don't really see any way that we're not going to hit these modified numbers by the end of the fiscal year. In fact, furniture, we've actually already hit 35,000. So we did need to increase those lines fairly significantly. The other area was part-time salaries, which we've increased by 150,000. The initial budget of 600,000, when that was projected, I think there was still a notion that we may be rolling back services at some point during this fiscal year, or the buildings wouldn't be open as much, and there would be less need for constantly staffed buildings. It has not turned out that way. So even if we weren't to hire anyone else right now, even if we didn't fill any positions, our part-time salaries expense for the year would be well over the 600,000. And with all the positions that the heads of branches have requested, if we were to fill all those in the time frame that they would like, I think we'd actually end up over 750,000. But I don't know how realistic that is. So the 750,000 figure is sort of in the middle. I do think there is an opportunity for savings at the end of the year, because we do have some fairly significant full-time vacancies as well as part-time vacancies that may not get filled as soon as we would like them. So that could certainly result in some salary savings by the end of the year. And you can also see in the other sections of the budget, materials, admin, and IT, we've looked for savings in each of those and managed to cut them a little bit, about 12,000 in materials, 7,000 in admin, and 15,000 in IT. So that's given us a little bit to work with there. But still, I think as far as if we're going to end up using less than 592,000 fund balance, it's going to have to come from salaries, really, potentially. Some of the other lines, professional services, maybe tax or payments, there's opportunities for savings there. But it would really be the salaries line if we don't end up filling some of these positions as soon as people had intended.
So I would like to speak along the lines of that. I believe, as Adam mentioned, there was a projection that we weren't going to be open quite as quickly as we had. We were expecting a bit of a slower rollout in our hours than we ended up having at the end of the year, and that was due to the New York State requirement that we go back to our full required hours when we had to, which was in the beginning of September. We were expecting that to be a little bit more gradual opening with hours up to that point. So we were expecting some of that. We've also had, because of COVID, whenever anybody has felt ill, we have required them to stay home, or not, not required, at least very, very, very highly recommended that they stay home, in which case we've had to bring in temporary workers. So a lot of this is the temporary workers that we're bringing in to cover shortages and stuff, because we are, as we have been for many years, extremely short-staffed, in such that if we have more than 2 people at certain branches call out at the same time, it gets us into a situation where we have to consider closing the branch due to staffing concerns. So between that, and then it's one of those, it's a really good thing, but a really bad thing. We've had several, as we like to call them, pandemic babies occur amongst staff. So anytime we have a full-time staff member go out on a maternity or paternity leave, we do cover their time off with temporary employees. And that, because of the blessings of our staff, we've had to increase staff usage as well. So that is why those numbers have gone up as much as they have in this last year.
I'll also just say that I think, I mean, we're going to have to start looking at the 22-23 budget in the next couple of months here. So I think it'll be more useful to look at this modified budget in reference to upcoming budgets rather than the initially approved one. I think some of these increased lines are more accurate as far as what we would see in the upcoming years.
And I do want to remind the full board that for the last at least 8 years since I have been with the organization, we have projected to use the fund balance every year. And we have not done that. I believe it's actually has been through the past 10 years. We have not had to dip into the fund balance. And we have gone 2 years without a budget increase. So it just, those two things, along with the pandemic and the current situation, have caught up with us at this point.
Adam, if you could just remind me, since I haven't been on the finance committee this year, when we set the budget for this current fiscal year, did we reduce staffing costs because of the closures? So when we're talking about increasing again, we're talking about returning to our pre-pandemic budget size. So not that we're necessarily increasing, but we're kind of returning to normal budget-wise.
That's correct. Yeah, the $600,000 part-time salary budget that was initially set, that was a reduction from even the 2019 budget, I believe. So the 750,000 is sort of in line with what it would have been normally, as far as just paying for raises and things like that. So yeah, this is sort of just reverting back to where we would have been pre-pandemic.
That makes sense. Does anybody else have any questions regarding the modification that's in front of us? Otherwise, I believe this has already been motioned by the Audit and Finance Committee so that it only requires somebody to second it before we can vote. Arlene, thank you. And if we don't have any further discussion, we can go to board docs to vote.
Arlene, please state your vote.
Yes.
Sarah Dallas, please state your vote.
And motion carries. Thank you. The next item under new business is our 2022 Board of Trustees meeting schedule. There's been a location change request made. Since we as the Board of Trustees approved our meeting dates for the next year, we also approved locations at the same time because we approved the entire document. So that's why we just need to approve the edit as well. I believe, if I recall correctly, why this change was requested, it's that Pine Hills is a polling place on Election Day. So we are moving, the request is to move our November board meeting from Pine Hills to Washington Ave branch and then meet at Pine Hills in October instead of Washington Ave. So to just flip the locations of the October and November meetings accordingly. I would take a motion and a second on this.
I make a motion.
And I'll second it.
Brigitte makes the motion, and that was Sarah Dallas seconding. Thank you both. Any further discussion on this motion? Otherwise, we can go to board docs to vote.
Arlene, please state your vote.
I vote yes.
Sarah Dallas, please state your vote.
Yes.
And motion carries. Thank you. Our next item of business is returning to our earlier conversation concerning the executive director search and hiring a consultant and the process by which the board is considering hiring a consultant. Would somebody like to, I guess, restart this discussion?
I know that, time is of the essence, but just listening to our conversations regarding your due diligence and finding legal services and what Bob said as far as that you had the RFP at 5,000 and anything after, anything less than you wouldn't have to, but anything more than that, you would have to. And this is a considerable amount of money. Not saying that this wouldn't be the candidate, but I feel better. And I know that, we do not want to burn out our intern director, but I would be more comfortable if we had more than one consultant proposal.
So I guess I would just like to work this, if we can talk through this example and put dates to it. I believe RFPs, and Bob, please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no set minimum amount of time that we need to post an RFP for. It's up to our discretion.
Correct.
Okay. So there is no minimum. We must post an RFP for 3 or 4 weeks. We could post an RFP for 2 weeks, continue reaching out to consultants and get proposals submitted. So that is one way that this process could be moved along. However, I believe the date that we would still be waiting for is if we do the RFP process, no matter how long the posted period is, that I believe we would still be bringing this back to the full board to vote on. So that would be the January meeting at the earliest, unless we called an emergency meeting. Is that what we would be looking at, minimum timeframe turnaround?
The January meeting is probably the fastest that you could do anything, but it is potential that you could get proposals. I just pulled up your policy to make sure that everything we said is correct. And I just noticed that the amount in the professional service contract section is no longer 5, it's $20,000. I do remember that changing. So where was the proposal from Bradbury Miller?
24.
Oh, so it's still over 20. Okay. The policy reads professional service contracts. The library will conduct a formal request for proposal process to secure any professional services expected to cost $20,000 or more. So one thing you could potentially do to expedite things without an RFP, if you were willing, would be to go to Bradbury Miller and say, can we negotiate this down to, $20,000 by, leaving some aspect of the, service out, or by streamlining a process or something. That might be one other thing to consider. And that way you wouldn't be overriding your policy. That doesn't get to the core of Brigitte's concern, which is they only have one proposal, but it's a way to deal with the policy issue if people were reluctant to do that.
Donna?
I make a comment and a suggestion. I had offered to obtain that first quote from Bradbury Miller, and when I saw the fee that they were proposing charging, I didn't go further because I wanted to bring it back to the committee to say, what do we need to do, and to confirm, was it in fact true that we would need to RFP or have an emergency override in order to move forward. So that being said, and we had a good discussion last Friday when we looked at the proposal. That being said, would an alternate possibility be, rather than going out for formal RFP, obtain 2 more quotes? And Sarah, you said that you had 2 firms that you are aware of that also do this kind of work. would the committee and the board be satisfied that we've done our due diligence by simply obtaining 2 more quotes, doing a comparison, and then voting for those versus going out for a formal RFP process?
I'd say I'm not categorically opposed to that, but it sounds like, you know, if we could do an RFP at the January meeting, we probably could only the same timeline as getting 2 quotes informally.
I do want to impress upon the board the time frame of this. Bradbury Miller did give us, you know, approximately 120 days of their process. So that's approximately a 3 to 4 month process, 4 months more likely. That puts us, even if we went with them now, that's a potential of not hiring anybody until March, which is after our finance discussions. And then if this goes any further out into April or May, we're getting into the budget vote season without actual director.
Yeah, and I know it's also been brought up that there are, if Jenna or Melanie, you know, the current number of executive director openings, was it 12, 14 that are currently posted?
No, it was 12 when I brought up the last time, and that was last month, and there's been several others posted since then.
It's a million billion. It's a million billion director searches out there. I can't stress enough how important our being expedited in this process is if we want to really be able to get talent that's currently on the market.
I just want to make a suggestion as well as bringing it back to committee. I mean, time is of the essence, of course, but we could always bring it back to committee and develop this a little bit further, hearing the discussion today.
So Ray, I guess, what are your feelings on Donna's proposal? If the committee was able to obtain 2 more quotes, is that something the board should consider instead of going out for a full RFP process? But if the committee can look at 3 quotes, and maybe we have an emergency board meeting to move the time period along, would that satisfy what we're trying to do here?
I definitely am in agreement with what Brigitte proposed, and that we definitely do need more quotes. Tom did bring up a good point that essentially we're kind of looking at the same time frame. If we're talking about the next board meeting with proposing anything, so I think that, you know, his perspective on it kind of opens up the floor again. A little bit in reference to our options. I definitely think we do need a couple more quotes, though. I am in favor of that. Regardless of, you know, we definitely need a couple more quotes. So
I'm just a little confused though, because you guys brought this to, like, the committee brought this to us with a single quote. And then at this meeting made the decision that you absolutely need more quotes.
We brought it to the board. I'm not sure, Brigitte, if you want to take it over here, but I'm fine with explaining why we brought it to the board.
Right. We brought it to the board under the assumption that we were going to vote for a consultant. However, listening to the discussion today swayed me that we did need 2 more because of transparency in the 24, you know, the RFP was way above. So, and how you did due diligence with the legal services. So I felt that we should take that much time in trying to find the executive director as well, and not cut a step out. So, you know, I apologize if you feel that this was a waste of your time today, but I think that due to the discussion, allowed me to see another perspective. So, and that was our initial hope, that we would have more than one person to bring to the table.
If you weren't able to get more than one person to bring to the table when you were in committee, why would holding off another month necessarily get us to a better place? I really want, I'm worried that if we have to wait for another committee meeting and then we have to try to schedule another board meeting, we might not have a director this summer.
So there were several things that happened in the interim. So we had the civil service meeting canceled, and that was something that we definitely wanted to attend and get some feedback from in relation to the ad hoc committee and our conversations and what we're doing. And one of the purposes for bringing this to the full board was to get everyone's consensus and see how they were feeling in reference to the job description was definitely one of them, requiring an MPA or not, or continuing education. That was definitely something that we discussed quite thoroughly in our ad hoc meeting. So it was definitely, me personally, I felt like it was definitely more to get a consensus of what the full board felt in reference to some of the job descriptions and where they're at with that. We were always wanting to get more than one quote. So this is where we were at. We had a meeting today. Civil service meeting was canceled. We definitely wanted to update the board and get a feel for how everyone else felt as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Rebecca just mentioned, there's the civil service meeting was on request from the personnel committee, not from the ad hoc search committee.
No, that was a personnel thing.
Right, but we were going, it wasn't an invitation for all board members to
all board members definitely could have come, but we had a specific agenda about things that we were doing on the personnel committee. Yeah, it seems like you guys have changed tune completely over the course of like 25 minutes.
Can I jump in here? I think thoughtful people came up with the policy to protect our funds and to protect the process of, what was it, $20,000 for consulting fees. And I don't feel comfortable not following the policy as written. I understand the emergency situation, but as Brigitte said, we are trustees of the funds. We have some responsibilities, and I think a couple more weeks, the two firms may decide not to put in a proposal either, but I think it's going to be holiday anyway. And January, I think, is soon enough.
Donna, how long did it take Bradbury Miller to put a proposal together?
I spoke to them last Monday and I had the proposal on Thursday. And I have a follow-up question also.
Go ahead.
Which is, one of the factors behind the committee bringing this to the full board was whether we wanted to consider an emergency override. That was really the thing. And I think in the course of the discussion this evening, that's where we got to the place where we said, you know what, maybe we really need to look at, yes, we could override it, but is that, the most transparent and appropriate thing to do? That being said, it's been a long time since I've done an RFP for the state. And I know those processes are very complex and lengthy, that there has to be a whole structure around it, which is why I suggest, I don't know how complicated Albany Public Library RFPs are, but it does seem like getting 2 additional quotes, I don't think it's cutting out a step by not doing a formal RFP. I think it's fulfilling the spirit and the purpose of why that policy was put into place, to make sure that we get more than, that we get multiple quotes for an expensive service. And it could save a few weeks, which makes a difference.
Is the ad hoc committee comfortable meeting very expediently, like very frequently over the next couple of weeks, if this is the plan?
I'm available.
Yes, we will make that happen, Jenna.
So
But
If-
so, I mean, we'll discuss it, see what our availability is, because as Sarah mentioned, it is the holiday time. So maybe the week after Christmas, that last week in December, but we'll discuss that as a committee.
Also, please don't steal my civil service meeting. I really, really need to talk to them. You guys might want to have a separate meeting with the civil service folks.
Yeah. But, you know, again, that being said, the reason I didn't go out for more quotes last week was the price tag caused me to ask the question, do we need to RFP this? And so in the interest of expediency, I can tomorrow reach out to 2 more firms and get more quotes, but I didn't want to override any formal RFP process that may have been required to take place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a
does.
lot of sense. I think we can fulfill our fiduciary duty by looking at the informal quotes and choosing the one that's best for us. I think so. I think ideally that would. Yeah, I don't know how quickly it could be done, but I assume. So I guess our process would be for the ad hoc committee to review those quotes and make a recommendation to the board.
And that could put a couple of weeks out, I think.
Yeah.
Best case, if possible, I would love to see this done before Christmas. If 2 proposals could come back this week or by Monday, and the committee could meet, and then we could have an emergency board meeting, that would be my ideal timeline if we have enough trustees who can be available, you know, no matter what time we set the meetings at. If we have the availability, I would love to see this also move expeditiously.
Yes, if we have the availability.
Yeah, I think if we told the firms that, you know, we needed quote in, you know, 5 business days, it seemed, I imagine they would, you know, abide by that.
And just for one more point of clarification or you know, for my own information, regarding if we did have to go out for formal RFP, how lengthy is that process? I know Bob said there was no minimum time that something needed to be posted, but in terms of putting all of the apparatus together to do a formal RFP, that takes time. And I don't know how much time that
If the
takes.
board were willing to delegate the creation and submission of the RFP to the committee and only make a decision on the selection, you probably could do it as quickly as 30 days, but that would be about as fast as you could do it. Any faster than that would be really, really hard.
Yeah,
30 days before posting? Or
No,
including?
30 days total, because I can get you an RFP document quickly. The committee could meet, approve it, we could get it out. The only question is, would you want to do interviews before the board actually made a selection? You know, so I think 30 is about the fastest you could do a whole RFP process.
Yeah. That being the case, I would be, you know, to my fellow committee members and to the board, I would be strongly in favor of just getting 2 more quotes and letting the committee decide or make a recommendation based on those quotes.
And I just want to clarify, the difference is between $20,000 and $24,000, not $5,000 and $24,000.
Correct.
So it's $4,000 over. Let's delegate to the committee then. That's my second choice. First choice is getting going.
Well, just so that we're clear, that on my summation of our meeting, I just gave us 3 options. And so there was never, I don't think we were just, bringing it to, what the 3 options were. And so during the meeting, I don't know which way I was going to lean toward, but we need the 2 codes. So thank you for referring it back to us, and we will get the job done. Thank you.
Sarah, could I ask you to send me the names of the 2 firms that you would recommend we look at? Thank you.
And thank you, Donna, for taking this on.
Sure.
Just for clarification, will they need to vote to get the quotes instead of going for a full RFP?
Yep, that's a deviation from the policy. I would reduce that to a motion. I don't think it's a deviation in spirit, as was pointed out, but I think it's a deviation in the specifics.
Could you word the motion for us, Bob?
Sure. Motion to, as an exception to the purchasing policy requirement, allow for the solicitation of 3 quotes to satisfy the RFP process in the selection of a search consultant.
Thank you.
Did you get that, Becky?
Yeah, motion, all right, hold on. Motion to, as an exception to the purchasing policy requirement, allow for solicitation of 3 quotes, and then I stopped.
To satisfy the RFP requirement for selection of an executive director search consultant.
I'll clean this up later. Okay. Motion to, as an exception to the to make an exception. Is that what you want?
Now, just motion, comma, as an exception to the
Okay.
purchasing policy, comma, to allow for. It's a little bit weird grammatically, but it should work.
Yeah. To allow for solicitation of 3 quotes to satisfy the RFP requirement for selection of executive director search consultant.
Sounds like the plan.
First,
Oh, would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Was that Sarah? Was that Brigitte or Sarah? Sorry.
Brigitte.
And then I saw Sarah's hand. Sarah, would you like to second?
Please.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we can go to board docs to vote.
Sarah Dallas, please state your vote.
Aye.
Arlene Way, please state your vote.
Aye. Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
The motion carries. And again, thank you, Donna, for reaching out tomorrow. And if the committee could just discussing possible meeting dates and times that work for you all for the beginning, middle of next week, that would be great, just to get it on the books before the quotes come back.
Yes, Rebecca's doing that as we speak.
Oh,
We'll probably
great.
do another lunch time meeting if that would be fine with all the committees. So she's doing a doodle search or a doodle poll now. So
Perfect. Thank you, Brigitte.
Mhm.
And thank you, Rebecca. The last item under new business is the quarterly board evaluation. And typically this is electronic.
yes, I just included it just to have it in there. But yeah, it can be sent out electronically through Google.
Thank you. So we can look for that after the meeting.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I see Sarah is leaving. Good night, Sarah. I believe that concludes our new business. Now we're moving on to the pandemic operations plan, the POP update.
Yes. So we realized as a group, as staff, that we needed to do an update to this document. The last update had been done in September, and some additional changes to CDC recommendations had been made. So, and we realized that while looking through the plan, a couple things just needed to be clarified. So we just clarify a lot of the stuff that you see highlighted in this document are just clarifications in the language, because we realized that they were different in two parts. And it's just more of the making sure that we are in adherence with CDC guidelines or anything that comes out of Albany County Health Department. And the big changes that we're recommending for the board this evening, if we go down to our continuation of services plan, which is the page 18, the library administration continues to rely on the Center for Disease Control, which provides clear guidance and metrics for operating public-facing institutions. And so we have made adjustments based on their guidelines and recommendations and what we have learned as an organization on how we can operate during these times. So we had in our substantial and high that permitted services, or actually they were listed under restricted services, was computer use and reference. Those were by appointment only. We realized that we've actually stopped doing by appointments and have just allowed walk-ins for those. So those are two changes that we wanted to do. And as well as restrooms, we had restroom use under restricted. And that was with the intent that if we needed to, if we had lack of staffing for facility staffing or regular staffing to keep up with the restroom cleanups, that we would have to restrict their use, but we found that we haven't been needing to do that. So we would like to remove computer use, reference, and restrooms out of restricted and move them into permitted services. For restricted services, we do want to continue indoor seating as restricted, but not eliminated. I believe we had that under eliminated before, because one of the other things we're going to suggest is dropping the headcount requirement. This was after a discussion with staff, with administration, and actually with other directors across the Upper Hudson Library System. It's been pretty much everybody's understanding that with headcounts, a lot of libraries aren't even reaching their headcounts. And for those libraries who have no headcount currently, they're not seeing that great rush of individuals coming into the library. It's still plateauing. As I said before, our door count numbers have plateaued, and we're still not hitting our door count numbers. We also want to specifically remove headcount, because as we go into the winter months, we do want to remind everybody that we are a Code Blue Coalition partner. And we really would have difficulty fulfilling that partnership if we had a head count on who was allowed and how many people were allowed into our building. So we feel that between people kind of self-regulating when they come into the library, and the ability, if we do put back our seating, indoor seating availability, just making sure that it is socially distanced, and we do remind people that they cannot move the furniture and it's there where we have it set out for reasons. So that would restrict indoor seating, because we wouldn't have our full amount of indoor seating back, but we would put it out in the first place because we're still under that high level. And under the high level, it was eliminated completely. So we would increase or eliminate headcount, allow for indoor seating, We're doing some outreach with restrictions, and that's as long as those outreach are safe and conducted by other. It's usually us going into a school or us going out into, it's not individuals coming into the library that we're allowing to come to do outreach. And then our study rooms, because of allowing for more people in the building and to allow to ease up the social distancing, we would allow study room usage back. But we would restrict it to only 2 people in the room at the time. So those are our suggestions for the current pandemic operation plan. Is that we would eliminate headcount, allow the seating, reference and computer use would be allowed without appointment. Restrooms would be open and study room use would allow for 2 people max in a room at a time. And we would also require for study rooms that the doors remain open for airflow. We were going to put on here that masking was going to be required at all times, and the governor has mandated that anyway, so that is out of our hands currently anyway. But while we are still in the high, that would also be a requirement should she eliminate that, which is scheduled for elimination, I believe, mid-January. If after that time, if we're still in the high level, we would still require masks at all times from everybody. So since there is a change of service, we do need you guys to vote on that.
Before I ask if there are any questions for Melanie, if we can get the motion on the table, a motion a second, then open for questions, that would be great.
I'll make a motion to adopt these changes as presented.
Thank you, Tom. Is there a second?
That looked like Arlene raised her hand there.
Oh, thank you, Arlene. Any questions for Melanie regarding these updates and changes concerning the POP?
I appreciate these changes. I think it will make the library run a lot more, feel like there's a lot less to jump through for patrons who want to use the library, and will hopefully make it a little easier for staff to monitor everything they need to monitor. They don't have to worry about appointments for computers and headsets. So I these changes work well, and I'm supportive.
I agree with Tom. I think these are smart changes. I've actually heard a number of complaints in the neighborhood about the way that we've been operating. And I think it's important that that this is a living document, because the pandemic keeps changing us and changing, and we keep understanding more.
Does anybody else have any further questions or comments before we vote on this motion? Seeing none, we can go to board docs and vote.
Arlene, please state your vote.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yep, I got it. Thank you.
So seeing that?
I'm sorry, what, Melanie?
No, I'm just seeing the results. I do want to just inform people that we're planning on putting these into effect on Monday. We're giving the staff this week to make sure that we have things in place, and by Monday, we'll have everything ready to go.
Great. Okay, I believe we are on to our second public comment of the evening.
We have not received any public comment.
Thank you, Rebecca. So before I look for a motion to adjourn, thank you, everyone. I know we had some issues to discuss tonight, and I really appreciate everybody weighing in and coming to a consensus. So thank you. A couple items I just wanted to give reminders of. Rebecca will be sending out the quarterly evaluation, and she sent out the doodle poll for February dates for our board retreat. So if you could take both of those things either tonight or tomorrow, that would be really helpful. And I just remembered that I believe January is our last meeting that we voted on being remote. And is Bob still here? That's because I believe the executive order will be expiring. So that was as far as we could go. So we'll be having to monitor the situation as it gets closer. Is that correct? We're watching if something else.
As you know, it's not an executive order. It's a statute, a statutory extension. So I believe, and you'd probably have a better handle on this than I do, Sarah, but I believe they chose the date of expiration so that they could be back in session before it expired. And given what we're dealing with, I kind of expect that they'll extend it again.
Yeah, so that should be, because I believe our January board meeting will fall on Tuesday, January 11th. So we should definitely have information, because did it go through January? Well, I don't recall the date at the moment that it was extended to, but hopefully we should have information by our January board meeting.
Yeah, it may have actually been later in the month.
January.
Yeah. What?
28th,
Okay.
the last business day.
Okay. So we will just remember to take a look at that at our January board meeting to figure out where we will be meeting for February. I believe those were all of the reminders I had. Thank you, everyone, for a productive meeting tonight. And at this point, I will take a motion to adjourn. Arlene?
Okay. Yes, I make the motion.
I second.
Donna, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we can all go to board docs to vote.
Arlene, please state your vote.
I vote yes.
Thank you.
And the motion carries. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you.
Good